Hello, everybody, and welcome to the January 18th, 2022 iteration of the Kubernetes SIG Windows community meeting. As always, these meetings are recorded and uploaded to YouTube, so be sure to adhere to the CNCF Code of Conduct. I'll start with some announcements. I don't see too many, but I did want to, anybody who missed it last week, the 122 release schedule is finalized. There's a link to that in last week's meeting notes. If you are curious, please take a look. And there's also a lot of information about the release team members too. So if you have questions or want to reach out to somebody from the release team, there's all of their contacts there. But you can also find all of that on Slack too. For this meeting, one announcement I had is we've been asked to, submit a talk for, or the talk outline for the KubeCon EU maintainer series talk for SIG Windows. And I was wanting to open it up to see if there's any topics that people would like to see covered in a little bit of depth. Some ideas that we had were deep dive into how, or like the different container users and how they operate. I think there was been a lot of interest in that in the past. Another one is possibly demoing the pod OS field. Ravi, maybe that's something that you could help with. I think people, now that it's hopefully going to beta in 124, it's something that we should probably start advertising and solicit a little bit more feedback on. If anybody has any other ideas or things that they'd like to see a deep dive, probably topics that we can cover in between 5 and 10 minutes, either bring them to this meeting or reach out in Slack and let us know, and we can try and get put that together. I believe that they want the synopsis for the talk by first week of March, so we still have time to do some planning and everything too.
Yeah, if it's first week of March, I think I'll have some time next month.
Yeah, and that's just to submit the talk where they like to do like the synopsis. I believe that we won't. I need to double check. I think they're still planning on doing hybrid, so we usually do the recording, and that is usually like another month after the talk submission deadline. Also, if anybody is interested, this probably means that the call for proposals for KubeCon EU is open or will be opening soon. So if you have an idea for another KubeCon talk you'd like to submit, you can pitch that to the call for proposal website. I'll get a link to that for the next meeting and have the dates and everything there. Is there anything else that anybody would like to announce? If not, we can go into the main agenda. Okay, I can start by doing a quick demo of Cured. So for folks who, first of all, we have a couple of members of the Cured community here. I don't know if Christian or Jack, if you want to say hi. But so those of you who aren't familiar with Cured, it's a kind of a project. Let me open up a link here. Maintained by Weaveworks that people have used that helps to schedule kind of rolling updates or coordinated updates for your nodes. And currently it's Linux only, but I've done some work to have some support for Windows that I want to demo and also get feedback about how it works. I think I mentioned before that, and at least Jamie said that there were some people who were familiar or kind of asking if there was Cured support for Windows, but so here's the project. I'll add the link to the agenda. And there's a lot of information about configuration and everything. I wanted to do briefly kind of deep dive into how this works for Windows because there were some challenges, and we'd like to get some feedback to see if this is an acceptable approach or not. But I can go ahead and do that while I'm demoing it. Let me find a different screen. Can folks see this? So the way that Cure normally works on Linux is it schedules a daemon set pod to each of the Linux nodes, and users have the option of providing a short script that will run periodically to check to see if there's a reboot pending on the node, or you can check for the existence of a file. And if that file is present, it indicates that there's a reboot of the node. And the Cure daemon set will do some coordination with all of on the daemon set to make sure that all of the nodes don't reboot at once, or the nodes only reboot during specific hours that are set there to really help with like stability of the overall cluster. For Windows, there were some challenges with that because there's no kind of uniform way of detecting if there is a reboot, and there's also not great mechanisms for cleaning up some of those files if there is a reboot. So I can show a little bit about what I did for Windows to get this to work and see if there's any feedback with that, and then do a quick demo of that. So this is a cluster that I already had set up. And I just have some IIS pods running on some Windows nodes, and then I have the Cure daemon set running. So the Cure daemon set is there. I'll exec into one of those. This one. And also, for anybody who is using host process containers, TTY support works now, which is a huge improvement. Thank you very much, Danny, for getting that set up. So on Windows, so on like a lot of the Linux-based machines, there's the bar run reboot required file that if you set it, it kind of indicates that there's a reboot pending, and that files also gets cleaned up afterwards if like on a reboot. So a lot of folks just use that to kind of detect if there's a reboot for the node. On Windows, there's no such equivalent. So what we done, or what I've done here is kind of written a little script that checks a bunch of registry keys to see if there's any reboots pending. So there's a couple of registry keys here that are owned by different parts of Windows. And if any of those registry keys are set, what we'll do is we'll write a file to the, we'll write the equivalent of that var run reboot required file. And I'll explain why we will do that in a minute. And then there's a couple different registry keys. We can check different registry keys if we need to. These were the two that I found that were the most applicable. One is, they're both from Windows updates here. But the reason why I decided to write this to a file was because these, if any of these registry keys are set outside of the surfacing stack, these registry keys are not cleared on the next reboot. So in order to avoid getting into an infinite loop, we wanted to have a way to have things like node problem detector or something signal that this node is having a problem. It's not because there's any pending Windows updates, but we still would like to do a reboot. So picked a file and kind of hard coded the path in Cured right now to be this var run reboot required. And also there's an init container that runs that does a couple things, but one of the things is it creates a scheduled task on the node that runs at startup. Well, within 5 seconds of startup, and then force removes any file that has that path there. So this way, different workloads or things can also signal that there is a reboot required in a kind of a relatively generic way. If anybody has any questions about that or has any better ideas on how to signal a reboot, please let us know. The other thing that we have to do is we have to write a kubeconfig file for the service account to write back, because we still don't have the in-cluster config support working in that. So I can do a quick demo real quick.
What's the, you said in-cluster support isn't why this is running as a host process, right?
It is.
I guess that
so-
doesn't make a difference though.
Yeah,
Okay.
the in cluster, because this is kind of described in the KEP, and I can point to an issue. We could maybe talk about it after. To give.
Okay,
Arvin
just
time to
keep
do his
going,
demo
and
too.
just keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, the accessing files that come in the host process container need to get accessed by a special path. We need to prepend the environment variable for there, and the in cluster config library does not honor that right now. So we just need to kind of wire it up to look for the secrets in the right area. But we can break out into that later.
Okay.
Okay, so for the demo, what I can do is I can just oh, I'm in. I'll just watch the pods here. So I have this cluster, I have 2 IIS pods, one running on each machine. And here I've already kind of SSH'd into the host to so we can write that var run reboot required file. And then actually you can watch the cured pods or the logs for the pod, but in I have it set to check every minute for the existence, or it'll run that script, that test pending reboot script every minute, and then after that we should see cured start to do its work. It'll start by coordinating the node and then draining the node, so we should see this one be getting terminated and then rescheduled to the other node. And then I also have it set for a 30-second delay. So after it after it gets to the point where it's going to start shutting down the node, it'll wait 30 seconds to give kind of the Windows stuff to clean up, and then reboot the node. And then we should see the cured daemon set stop or go into a unknown state and then go from there. Let me follow the logs. So we're on the 0, 0 node. Okay, so we just got to the point where it does some checks. We've just got to the point where we've determined that there is a reboot required. And I just set this up right for the meeting, so I hope I got everything set up. It might take another little bit. Yeah, but so I think one of the main reasons why I wanted to bring this up here was because there is some differences in behavior between how this would work for Windows and Linux, and wanted to see what kind of use cases, if there were any that people would want to make sure were covered for Windows, or if there are better alternatives for detecting if there's a pending reboot. As is, this should detect if there is any kind of pending Windows updates that require a reboot. It should detect if there were any service changes or like Windows components that were changed that need a reboot, like if you installed the containers feature or things like that, or it should detect if there's that file running. I'm going to give this another minute, and then if not, and then I'll hand it over to Arvin to give Arvin plenty of time to demo. Let me make sure that I did set it for 1 minute. Oh, okay. Nope, that's what's wrong. It's set to check every hour. So this will be a very boring demo then. Let me fix that up and I'll hand it over to Arvind now, and then we can come back. That's okay with everybody?
No, that's
It
awesome. I
looks-
think it's super cool.
It looks like there's a new log message every minute from what I see in the logs.
Yeah, so one of the other things that it does is it exposes a Prometheus endpoint with metrics for if there's a reboot required or not. And that is, I believe, set to check every minute. So that's where these messages are coming from. So you can also check, just check to see how many of the nodes are pending if you don't want to use the reboot functionality at all. And I guess also real quick, we have some of the maintainers for the Cured project down here. If anybody has any questions.
Mark, is there any specific Kubernetes version this is required for, or like, is there any minimum requirements to get this using? I know Curate is very popular with the customers, and they've been asking for Windows support for a very long time.
Yeah, the minimum version is going to be 122 because that's when host process containers were introduced as alpha.
Mm-hmm.
And this does require host process containers.
So containerd basically as well.
And containerd. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. Is there a place where this is called out if somebody asks, or it's documented?
In the document, so I have a PR open with this work in progress, and then I've highlighted it, said like in order for this to work on Windows, we do need host process containers, and then just pointing to the link in the Kubernetes documentation for all the requirements to run host process containers.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I guess any other questions? If not, Arvind, do you want to take over?
Sure. Can I just share my screen? Will I have?
Yep, should be set up.
All right.
I'm going to work in the background to fix up that deployment too.
Basically shared a whiteboard. Can folks see my screen at this point?
I just see that whiteboard.
Big white thing.
All right, let me try this again.
I've been having issues sharing my whole screen lately.
Oh, okay. I have to say portion of the screen or something.
I usually have to share individual windows.
What about now?
Now it's a black screen for me.
It says you have started sharing your screen, but I don't see anything.
What about now? Can you see a terminal prompt?
No, it's a weird pattern of horizontal lines.
This looks like the blacked out stuff of a window that you aren't sharing. But it's a different gray pattern now.
Are you using Wayland for your display?
Yes.
driver? Wayland strikes again.
I just wish there was a option for me to just say share my whole.
Yeah, sharing your whole screen with Slack doesn't work with Wayland, but just individual windows. But I think on Zoom, the whole screen works.
Yeah, where's the option for sharing the whole screen though? I just see.
Are you using Chrome?
No, I'm using the client, the Linux client.
No, okay.
Oh, it doesn't. Yeah.
I just see the only option. Okay, let me try moving to another screen and trying it from there. Do you see something now?
It's that gray pattern again. You could try joining through the browser
Okay.
and sharing from there.
All right, I'll have to disconnect and join again. Sorry, folks.
Well, I was waiting. All of the action happened, so I can share my screen again while we're waiting for Arvind, and then we can also. Jay, I think you added some questions to the agenda. Okay,
I
had
a very simple question, but if anyone else has other stuff, go ahead and I'll go last.
I still had the history going. So what you'll see here is we've acquired a reboot lock. So this is part of the configuration for the Cured stuff is, you know, you can specify like to not reboot all of your machines at once in the case of a new Windows update going live. So it acquires a lock, and then it cordons and trains the machines. Here you'll just see the verbose output of that. It runs a shutdown command. In this case, we've just hard-coded shutdown.exe, force restart in 5 seconds, and then leave a little message of cured. And then the next thing you'll see is a little while later, all the sessions getting terminated because the reboot happened. So here's the history of what we saw. Just watching the logs is the one on the 0 node got terminated, got scheduled to the got rescheduled, got placed on the next node, and kind of came up and running while this was shutting down. So I'll leave a link to the PR and the Cured project in the notes too, so people can kind of comment and take a look if you're interested in, or follow if you are interested in running this for Windows. All right, let me hand it back to Arvind.
All right, second try.
It works, I think.
Woohoo! Yay! All right, folks. So all right. So to give everybody a little bit of background about this is this feature is about ability to view node logs of services running on the nodes or log files that are in raw log folder in both Linux and Windows. On the Linux side, what happened is this is a feature that was actually introduced by Clayton Coleman very early on in the OpenShift development cycle in 4.x, mainly as a request from the support side or to help the support team, the Red Hat support team, in debugging customer issues where they have to have some access to the individual nodes to look at the kubelet logs or kubeproxy logs or one of the journal logs for CRI-O, the runtime, or any service that's running there. So when the Windows team inside Red Hat came about and started adding support for Windows, the support folks asked us for the same sort of support on the Windows side. And Christian, who's also on this call, implemented that on the OpenShift side. And so when we were having this discussion in SIG Windows, there was an interest for this feature to be upstreamed because the rest of the community seemed to want to do. So Christian and I have been working on upstreaming whatever Clayton did for Linux and whatever Christian did for Windows and making it work with kubelet and kubectl. So at the moment, we are targeting 124 alpha. This feature is going to be behind the node lock feature gate. And what I have here is a cluster that was brought up using SIG Windows DevTools. We have two nodes. One is the control plane node, and the other is the Windows node. And what we can do with this new feature is you can do something like, so here, what I'm saying is, go to the Windows node and show me the log of the service called Microsoft Windows Security SPP. I have no idea what that service does, but it's one of the logs that I'm able to view. And as you can see, you're able to now see the logs of that particular service. You can also do other things like you can look at everything under C var log is visible on the Windows host. So you can do something like this. It'll show you all the logs or all the directories that are available. And say you want to see the kubelet logs, all you have to do is this. And this will let you see all the kubelet logs. Similarly, you could do the same thing for the Linux host. in the Linux side, it's a little bit more easier. You can point kubelet as a service, and it shows the logs. Whereas on the Windows side, the kubelet just logs to a file, and so you have to actually show the file. So in a very high level, this is where Christian and I are at this point in this feature. There are some more features that we need to add to this. One is to make sure that some of the command line options that we have added work. We also want to do things like, what is the other thing that we want to do? There is a heuristic thing that we need to add where if someone says something like this, services equals kubelet, the end user needn't know whether whether the service is outputting to a log or to any other mechanism, but for the client to figure out what that option is and to show the logs either from a file or from journal CTL or from the Windows get event. So those are some of the things that Christian and I are still working on. Hopefully we'll be able to get this into 124 as a feature. So that's the demo. Any questions, folks?
I think it might be worth calling out that this does not rely on the host process containers, has no minimum, would have, I guess, the minimum version of Kubernetes would be the version that it's introduced. And this, I think, could be really helpful for debugging issues with starting containers, and other things which wouldn't work without the host process containers. So.
Yeah, that's correct, Mark. We're not using host process containers. This is as long as you, at least in the alpha phase, you need the feature gate enabled, and once that feature gate is enabled, this would just work out of the box as long as you have the latest kubectl running. And the kubelet.
And if I may add, the kubelet as well. And we're essentially using the kubelet as a streaming server to stream out the logs. And yes, this is at Red Hat, this is probably our most used debugging tool. It's wrapped in a tool called mustgather. And yeah, for node debugging, this is really the go-to tool to get logs off of those hosts. And this is the first time I've actually seen it run with kubectl here. So yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Arvind.
Yep. What's the best way for other folks to try this out? Would it be possible for you to share either the kubelet or the kubectl builds and get it running in the dev environment?
Trying to think what the best way to do that
or
is.
Just wait.
One is to use our branch that Christian and I have been sharing, and just build kubelet and kubectl from there, and get that into. So the way I've been using SIG Windows DevTools, I just point SIG Windows DevTools at my local repository. I did have to go and do some extra things on the Windows node, though. On the Linux node, it was easy. But on the Windows node, I had to go and actually manually add the feature flags, because it seems that the kubeadm doesn't take the feature flags and apply it directly to the kubelet service on the Windows side. I had to go and change the NSSM service that was pointing to a particular PowerShell script, and I had to add the feature flag to that particular PowerShell script. This took me a day to figure out. So if someone wants to do this, just let me know, and I can help you folks. I tried debugging why kubeadm was not picking it up. It was turning into be a rabbit hole. So I said, I'm going to focus on the feature and get that going. But yeah, in kubeadm, if you mention what kubelet args that you want, that doesn't get picked up on the Windows side. It might be something that we're doing incorrect in SIG Windows DevTools, but I didn't look too deep into that.
I'll have to look offline. I'm pretty sure we've had that issue with host process containers, and I think we did solve it with kubeadm, but I'll need to follow up offline.
Yeah, it might be also the way we are executing kubeadm or something, right? Yeah.
Maurizio, I see you have your hand up.
Yes. So, yeah, I think this was a great demo. I think I might start using it for CSI proxy too. And I had a question about it, which is related with the path flag. So is this relative to some path that is set somewhere? I'm asking this because unlike the tools that you have to create a cluster, in the Kubernetes code base through KubeApp, all of the logs are in etc Kubernetes logs. That may be a different path. I think it's bar logs in what you have. So is it possible to configure this path?
At the moment, no. And I think there was some hesitancy about making this configurable as a security concern. So when we wrote the announcement, I think the agreement was it would be hard coded to varlog both on Linux and Windows. But yeah, I mean, if we decide that there's no security concern, which I doubt there is, I doubt that there isn't. The basic thing is, Mauricio, is that folks, especially Tim Hawkins, does not want this to be a way for people to have a peek into the node itself. And the other TBD also on my plate and Christian's plate is to make sure that this works only for a cluster admin and not for any other user.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
I do have a question. You might have shown it, but if you did, I apologize. But could you possibly enable like a more verbose logging option through this, or just whatever it is configured right now? Because, for example, if there's some issue that can trigger sometimes, I would like to enable a more verbose logging for the kubelet on a node. Just through this CLI without having to log into the node, change the verbosity, restart the service, and so on, you know?
I would think
So
that outside. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I would think this is essentially just accessing nodes that are already stored somewhere, either in, I think it's the win get event log or something on Windows nodes, and the journal D logs on Linux nodes. So you would still have to change the kubelet config to actually log more stuff to that log. We can only really access what's already there. So I doubt that is possible the way you imagine right now.
Yeah, and I would say further that changing kubelet configuration, like service configuration, is sort of outside the scope of this announcement. So at the moment, we're not thinking about changing, because I would think that would become a more generic sort of feature, right? I have the kubelet service and I want to be able to administer a node and update the kubelet services, args or something like that. I would think that that's outside the scope of this particular announcement, but I see where you're going with what you're asking for.
One thing that might be possible, and I think this was touched upon in the enhancement, but probably not for alpha, is if you do have more verbose logs, the APIs that this calls, like the get win events, do have filters. We might be able to plumb through some filtering, so you can initially only get, you know, info or like error logs, and then have it be exposed to you, and then get more verbose logs through the CLI. But yeah, they need to already be enabled in to be logged.
I think that sounds doable. Right now, we kind of compose that win get event call, and you can specify multiple services and stuff like that. But yeah, if we haven't really dug into all the flags that win get event might expose, but if there's a flag you'd like to use, it should be possible to kind of add a flag on the kubectl side to then make that flag used with win get event.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue that I've been running into is just how do you get, given a Windows service, how do you get the logs for it, right? I just haven't been able to figure out how to do that. It only works for services that log to the application provider inside Windows. Those
Yeah,
logs.
Windows logging is kind of a mess, and it really depends on the individual service about how they want to log.
Exactly. It almost seems like if I don't have knowledge about an individual service, I don't know how to get the log. So this will work for things like if you have a Docker service running, this should work. But if you have like a generic service that's like eventing to ETW, for example, like Containerd is doing, we're out of luck.
Yeah. I need to drop for Signode. Thank you very much for the demo. I think this has come a long way. It'll be super helpful. Jay, I'm gonna hand it over to you if you want to keep going with some of the pairings, but I'm gonna also stop the recording now. So thank you everybody for attending.
Thank you, folks.
So Arvin, so